The orbital sky of Drixel Station pulsed with traffic lights, but Trent Moreland only had eyes for the docking platform ahead. The Grover's Nail was overdue for engine calibration, but it still ran, and in this line of work that was enough. His contact stood beneath a steel-ribbed awning, gloved fingers flicking a data tablet. Vailtha's exosuit caught the overhead lights in strange ways, greenish at one angle, coppery at another. Eyes like liquefied silver blinked slowly as Trent approached. "You're punctual," Vailtha said. His voice modulator clicked faintly between syllables. "Rare in your species." "I charge by the interval," Trent replied. "Let's see the cargo." The alien's head tilted, amused or unimpressed. Trent never could read these types. He followed Vailtha through a corridor that stank faintly of coolant and fish oil, then down a lift shaft into Dock 7G. 3 sealed capsules stood under automated clamp rigs, each marked only with crimson sigils Trent didn't recognize. "Where's the manifest?" "There isn't one," Vailtha said. "That's not how this works." "It is now. You'll get coordinates. Payment on delivery. No scans. No stops." Trent stared at the capsules. No temperature tags. No hazard indicators. No traceable serials. He'd handled odd shipments before: synthetic pheromones, repurposed bionanites, expired cryochips. This was different. "Extraction material from the sponge colonies on Tau Cora 6, Vailtha said flatly. "Highly marketable. Legal in 6 systems, tolerated in 4 more." "And the others?" Vailtha smiled with his eyes only. "Just avoid them." Trent's jaw tensed. "If I get boarded?" "You won't. Unless you're stupid." They loaded the capsules into the Grover's Nail with surprising ease. The ship groaned under the weight, but nothing unexpected. Still, something gnawed at him. Not fear. More like friction between instinct and opportunity. Before leaving, he turned back. "One question." Vailtha waited. "Why not run it yourself? You've got the resources." "That's exactly why I don't. I need someone small. Forgettable." Trent didn't like the sound of that. But he needed credits, real credits. Not barter vouchers or meal slips. He launched within the hour. As the Grover's Nail drifted away from Drixel's orbital shade and into open trade lanes, Trent sat alone in the cockpit, watching the stars stretch thin ahead of him. He told himself it was just another job. Just cargo. Just credits. He didn't believe it. Trent leaned back in the pilot's chair, one boot propped against the worn console, watching old navigation symbols scroll by like fading memories. The Grover's Nail had crossed into the neutral corridor threading between syndicate claimed systems and the loosely governed fringe zones. No beacons. No patrols. Just unspoken agreements to stay quiet, stay quick, and never trust sensor silence. The jump lane was ancient, stretched and stitched back together after multiple collapses during the energy wars. It vibrated faintly, not through the controls but somewhere deeper, as if the hull itself remembered trauma. Trent checked the cargo status again. The hold's temperature remained stable. The crates hadn't moved. Still sealed. Still silent. He reached for his cup, cold brew, recycled water, bitterness long gone, and sipped it while watching the long-range feed. That's when the light flickered. Not overhead. Not even on the board. But on the auxiliary feed from the engine bay. A flicker barely there. Like someone had passed in front of the bulkhead light and just kept walking. Trent squinted. Rewound. Played it again. Nothing. He rubbed a palm down his face and keyed into the intercom. Ship-wide systems check. Verify isolation locks on cargo hold 2A. Pause. Then, isolation confirmed. Manual override disabled by contract condition. Cargo hold 2A sealed. That last part gave him pause. He hadn't disabled the override. The contract, maybe, but most traders used boilerplate clauses. He glanced toward the aft corridor. The way light settled back there, it was darker than it should have been. Not unlit, but softened like light passed through moving water. Trent stood. Not quickly. He grabbed the sidearm out of habit, not because he thought he'd need it. And still, something told him to stay quiet. The walk to the rear took longer than it should have. The ship wasn't that large, but the quiet pressed in, thick, unnatural. He passed a tool rack, a ladder alcove, emergency suit locker, all untouched. Then he reached the hold. The external control panel was glowing a soft blue. Normal. But the air near it was warm. The ship's ambient temp hadn't shifted, yet a fine sheen of moisture beaded at the edges of the steel. He punched the feed open. The internal camera activated. 3 containers. Still upright. One had a faint pressure vent misting gas near the seal, as though some process inside hadn't finished, or had begun again. Trent leaned closer. Movement. Small. Slow. Deliberate. A limb, no, an appendage too thin for industrial servos, curled out from under one of the capsule lids. He froze. The thing wasn't panicked. It wasn't testing the seal. It was mapping the surroundings. Studying. Then, as if it knew the camera was watching, it turned its head, if that's what it was, and tapped the lens once. Then it pulled back out of sight. Trent closed the feed. He walked back to the bridge and sat down without speaking. On the edge of the dashboard was a post-it. He didn't remember sticking it there, but it was his handwriting. Always ask what's in the box. Too late now. The stars outside thinned as the Grover's nail neared the curve of a dead zone, an old combat graveyard where NAV markers had long since burned out. Trent set a new course. But the warmth in the air didn't go away. Trent dropped the Grover's nail out of the jump lane 30 hours ahead of schedule. The coordinates Vailthu had given for delivery on Hoxton Spire were burned into the NAV grid, but Trent wasn't heading there anymore. He rerouted to a lesser-known depot called Ralwyn Point, a Rust Belt trading outpost half forgotten by the corporate registries and completely ignored by border patrols. The kind of place where a man could ask strange questions without drawing a badge to his doorstep. The nail docked with a crunch and a hiss. Manual clamps took longer to engage, but no one here relied on automated guides. Too many years of ion residue and sabotage meant every port operator trusted their own hands more than machine logic. The one who met him at the airlock was a stout figure with gray skin and copper-colored teeth. She wore a scarf of desiccated synth plant strips and introduced herself with a simple name, Amber. "Running hot?" she asked. "No flags," Trent said. "Just curious." She snorted. Nobody reroutes to Ralwyn out of curiosity. They walked toward the loading sector. The air stank of fermented algae oil and melted foam steel. Through the mesh of the service ramps, Trent caught glimpses of other docked vessels. Small haulers, freelance interceptors, even an antique mining rig now doubling as a cargo motel. Amber led him into a dim chamber layered with sensor scramblers and radio dampeners. A security measure, she claimed. Paranoid's haven, really. He pulled up the cargo feed and played the footage, the still frame where the thing inside the container pressed its appendage to the camera. Then paused it. Amber leaned in slowly. Her pupils widened. Her throat shifted, a dry swallow. "Where'd you pick this up?" "A contact near Tau Cora." "Name?" "Didn't ask." She rubbed the edge of her jaw, then tapped the screen. "They're not cargo," she said quietly. "They're Harviks." "Species?" "Not officially. They aren't listed." "That's intentional." Trent frowned. "They're alive. They're more than that. They're engineered. Harvested. Designed to survive prolonged trauma for genetic conditioning." "Conditioning for what?" "For breeding." He stared at her. "For military traits," she went on. "Pain endurance, regenerative systems, adaptive memory. They're passed from generation to generation. Farmed for specific lineages." "Your shipment?" "It's breeder stock. If they're old enough to show that kind of cognitive response," she gestured to the still image, "they're far along." Trent's mouth went dry. "I was told it was nanofiber extract," he muttered. "They always say something like that. So long as you don't open the crate and they don't die en route, no one asks questions. Not until they're unpacked." Amber stood up. "You've already been tagged. Probably the moment they entered your hold. But no one will come for you yet. The systems they move through, syndicate worlds, trade courts, they don't want attention." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying if you offload them to the buyer, they disappear. And eventually so do you." Trent exhaled through his nose. Slowly. "I need options." "Options." Amber glanced back at the footage. "You have two. Make the drop and stay useful until they stop needing you." "And the other?" Don't make the drop. She let that hang in the air. The Grover's nail left Rowland Point under silent drift. Trent killed the transponder before he cleared the exosphere, then angled toward a backscatter lane so tangled with debris signatures no one could track movement without cross-referencing old war logs. Every part of him itched to punch in the original coordinates and dump the crates, dump the whole damn problem, but the image from the hold feed stayed lodged in his mind. The creature hadn't panicked. It had watched. Trent stared at the NAV display until it blurred, then blinked and rerouted again. This time to Istreen 4. The planet didn't appear on any corporate map. Its real name had been erased in a language purge a decade ago, after the Resistance there began hacking the broadcast codes of interstellar auctions. They didn't just rescue the so-called non-classified species. They exposed the bids, the buyers, the medical data, the results. He'd never been there. Didn't know anyone who admitted they had. As the nail neared the outer moons, a warning pulse hit his console. Passive scan net. He muted every system and waited. A voice cracked through, rough, metallic, filtered through 5 layers of security. Inbound freighter, state your business. Trent responded with a freight code he hadn't used in years. Not since the days he ran contraband hypergels for research colonies too broke to bid on licenses. There was a long pause. Then, you've got 5 minutes to hit the chute. After that, you're a heat signature. Coordinates followed. No beacon. No glide assist. Trent tightened his grip on the controls and nosed down. The nail slammed into the planet's upper atmosphere and dropped like a rock. He threaded the chute manually, bracing each time the hull moaned around him. The chute was vertical, an old exhaust shaft from a terraformer installation, lined now with camouflage plating and pulse jammers. It was designed to fry drones and mislead scans. By the time he broke atmosphere and leveled off, he was running on inertia. The underground port unfolded before him like a scar cut into the bedrock. Jagged, exposed, surrounded by dry forests curled in strange patterns. He landed with less ceremony than control. The response was quick. 4 figures in patchwork armor approached. Not guards, more like field medics crossed with soldiers. One carried a containment reader. Another had a device that looked like it had been built out of mining tools and surgical gear. They said nothing. Trent opened the bay. When the first container clicked open, no one moved. One of the Harviks, if that was truly their name, stepped forward. It was smaller than the others, pale across its segmented back, with faint spirals like burn marks woven into its flesh. Its limbs were jointed 3 ways, but it stood balanced and quiet. Then it looked at the medics. And nodded. Trent's heart stumbled. None of them spoke. The creature turned and made a low motion with one arm, and the others followed, dozens, emerging from the crates not with panic but caution. Coordination. Like they'd known this day was a possibility. The medics scanned them all. Not once did they draw a weapon. Later, once the nail had been powered down and camouflaged into the hillside, a man with dust-covered robes and a calm voice approached Trent outside the landing pad. "You'll never fly corporate again," he said simply. "I figured. Word will spread. Vailtha won't forget. The syndicates won't forgive." Trent watched the Harviks disappear through a covered corridor beneath the rock. He didn't ask where they were going. He just said, "I'll need new codes. A different route map. Access to low-tier relays." The man nodded. "Then we'll see what kind of pilot you really are." Gone were the registry codes, the synthetic fuel tags, and the false merchant logos Trent had once displayed with casual arrogance. What replaced them wasn't flashy. Patchwork shielding, rerouted cooling lines, and a NAV array that operated on decrypted fragments scavenged from fallen war satellites. Trent didn't complain. If anything, it felt like the ship had been waiting for this. The man in dust-colored robes, who never gave a name, provided more than new credentials. He handed over sealed cargo with no physical weight and instructions that made no commercial sense. Encrypted neural banks, memory cores cracked from private auction blocks, and data burst fragments that, when reassembled, documented entire trafficking chains. "Distribute these," he said. "To the right eyes." Trent didn't ask who those eyes belonged to. Didn't need to. His first run was to a shattered observatory ring orbiting Orsis V, now occupied by a group of archivists who refused to align with any government. Then to the listening stations near the Caldrift Ridge, where automated signal catchers still ran on solar draw from a star that barely emitted light anymore. Each time he dropped a drive, someone lit up the data. Someone broadcast it. Someone forwarded it into deeper networks. The reaction was slow at first. Then the pressure built. Private trade groups closed ranks. A syndicate flag vessel was torn apart by an unknown interceptor near the Yelkan Belt, its black boxes erased before anyone could respond. On the fringe channels, whispered rumors of an exchanger's shadow started circulating. No face, no allegiance, just a human with a rusting freighter and an agenda. Trent knew they were talking about him. Or the idea of him, anyway. That was fine. On his third cycle through the drift routes, he took on a passenger. Not a person, another crate. It looked inert. Wasn't. A single Harvick, older than the ones he'd offloaded on Istreen 4, marked by deep scars and one missing forelimb. No words passed between them. But when Trent opened the rear interface and activated the holofeed, the Harvick tapped twice at the data grid. A name appeared. Not Veiltho. Brelas Rhine. He was a broker. Higher tier than Veiltho. Had his own fleet. Own routes. Human but deeply embedded in cross-species black contracts. Known to sell surveillance intel to both syndicate clans and free market mining boards. Trent smiled without humor. He rerouted the Grover's Nail one more time. 3 weeks later. Near the edge of Jesser Reach. Brelas Rhine's carrier exploded in 4 directions at once. No military ships in sight. No known impact signature. Just pieces. News of it didn't make the standard channels. But in backrooms, on encrypted relays, and through jittery comms in forgotten sectors, a warning spread. The trade routes aren't safe anymore. Not for them.